Hmm. Got everybody in a tizzy. You know, the young man who he died. Just turned out that he did die. The young man who charged the, oh boy, the gates at the Capitol. Bless his heart. I'm so sorry about this police officer losing his life. Boy. So, but thank you so much, Reverend Dr. Yuri. We all kicking off the beginning of the week with you. Always appreciate you. But how you doing? Things are going well for you and your family? Praise the Lord. You know, I'm looking for an allergist because now that is a shot I'm going to get like right away. Because I have to tell you, I am miserable right now. Gosh, I just back up on StreamYard, everybody. All right, here we are. And so on Facebook, on the Santita Jackson and Friends, meet the Morning Stars over there. And also go to the Santita Jackson Show. Please like and subscribe on that new YouTube channel. We're going to be developing some things that you're going to think you're going to enjoy. But first, I need you to like and subscribe, like and subscribe. And we, of course, we're going to have good news with Reverend Dr. Todd Geary. We'll be talking with Dr. Deborah Holden about these spiking numbers in with COVID-19 and what you can do to protect yourself. And then we've got to talk about this, what's happening in Georgia. Major League Baseball decided to relocate the All-Star game. What does that mean? They're feeling the pressure. What do you think about that? Stacey Abrams says, you know, boycotts have their point, but maybe not yet. Other progressives uh, and activists are saying, no, it's the threat of the boycott that has got everybody all upset. So keep on keeping on. So, want to know what you're going to think about that. And then, of course, we've got to talk about this trial. Riveting testimony last week. What is going to happen this week? Have no idea. Have no idea. But let's get to some of these headlines before we get to the news so that we can get right to the show. Chicago, we're going to have a high of 73 degrees. Yes! Scattered thunderstorms. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 81 degrees, mostly sunny. Beautiful day, even as you are dealing with so much in the great Twin City area. Minneapolis is on edge. That is the headline in The Guardian. As the trial of former Minneapolis police officer, then Minneapolis police officer, Derrick Chovin, goes into its second week, Ilhan Omar says that Minneapolis is on edge. She said, she was reminded that few trials involving police officers result in conviction. And she was asked on CNN's State of the Union, are you and your city prepared for the possibility of a hung jury or a not guilty verdict? She said, quote, the community is on edge about that. We have seen justice not delivered in our community for many years. I think there's a lot of confidence in State Attorney General Keith Ellison and the prosecutors in this case, but we are all eagerly awaiting to see how this trial shakes out. It's been really horrendous to watch the defense put George Floyd on trial instead of the former police officer who's charged with his murder. Indeed, what we're going to see as the prosecutors are beginning to tie together the case for the prosecution of George Floyd, what we're going to see is the health of George Floyd that is going to be on trial. They're going to make an issue of that. So what do you think about all of this, everybody? As George Floyd's family describes the heart-wrenching experience it is to watch their loved one killed over and over again from various angles as we see all of this footage. Guess what's happening in England, everybody? In England, everyone is going to be offered twice weekly COVID tests, according to Boris Johnson, their prime minister. He is set to unveil this plan for universal COVID-19 tests as a means to ease England out of the lockdown. Could that happen in the United States? In the meantime, the pandemic has sharpened inequalities, according to an IMF report, and they feel that this could fuel civil and social unrest. In the meantime, AstraZeneca, after a stern rebuke about their efficacy, about their effectiveness, they released new data supporting their vaccine. In the meantime, the United States, Johnson & Johnson in charge of the plant that botched the COVID-19, and they've removed AstraZeneca from the development of their own vaccine. Wow, the manufacturing of it anyway. And the CDC director is walking a tightrope on pandemic messaging, everybody. Last week, she said that if you're going into the Easter holiday fully vaccinated, then you don't need to be masked. Then the CDC had to walk that back. So people are trying to figure out what the deal is. We're going to be talking about that very, very shortly. In the meantime, Ilhan Omar, Congresswoman from the Twin Cities, from Minneapolis actually, is at odds with Stacey Abrams over the Georgia All-Star boycott. Of course, Abrams says, I respect boycotts, although I don't want to see Georgia families hurt by lost events and jobs. Georgians targeted by voter suppression will be hurt as opportunities go to other states. In the meantime, Omar said, we know that boycotts have allowed for justice to be delivered in many spaces. The civil rights movement was rooted in boycotts. We know that apartheid in South Africa ended because of boycotts. And so our hope is that this boycott will result in changes in the law, because we understand that when you restrict people's ability to vote, you create a democracy that isn't fully functioning for all of us. So what do you think about that? Because, Major League Baseball is going to relocate the All-Star game. For those of us who use Facebook, watch out. More than 500 million accounts. Our information's been leaked. Wow. Your photos and other data, personal data. It turns out that more than half a billion Facebook users all around the world have been found available on a website for hackers, including Mark Zuckerberg. Oh my gosh, what is going on, everybody? And of course, Noah Green, the young man who ran the barricade at the Capitol last week, he made his transition. And of course, we've lost a police officer, a Capitol Hill police officer. We've had a really, really hard time with that. So what is going on with this young man? His brother said that he received a message from his brother saying that he was going to be homeless. And they're connecting him to a whole lot. We're going to be talking about that later on in this show. Amazon has apologized as they admit that drivers do sometimes have to urinate in bottles. Wow. Can you believe that? Because of the routing, because they're not able to reach restrooms because they have got a schedule to make. Sometimes they have to urinate in bottles. In the meantime, we've got a water crisis. Hundreds of residents in Manatee County, Florida, were ordered to evacuate their homes over Easter weekend as officials feared that a wastewater pond would collapse at any time. Wow. The Governor Ron DeSantis, declared a state of emergency for the area, and a portion of the containment wall at the leak site shifted laterally. But to continue to keep our eyes on that. And congratulations to the ladies of Stanford. They defeated Arizona to win their first NCAA women's titles in 1992. Love it, love it, love it. Reverend Dr. Todd Geary, talk to me. I need some good news today. First,
80 in Minneapolis on today. Something's going on, and certainly what's going on in Georgia is worth noting. But we need to send Amazon a note. That's not what they mean by pee in the bottle. That ain't what that means. That ain't what that means. That's something different. That's something different.
oh, is that awful?
But anywho,
Oh, thank you.
that's the craziest thing. Like, look, come on now. After all the stuff, certain, certainly, with all the money they've been making in the midst of this pandemic, record profits, they could at least find a way to avoid being accused of unfair labor practice. That's just
Absolutely.
crazy. But
Absolutely.
anyway, we just understand. We'll be keeping our eyes on that one for sure.
Absolutely.
But it's Monday. Good morning, Chicago. Good morning, Twin Cities. Time to get up, time to get moving. It's springtime. I know you're going to have to wipe your eyes because in springtime, my eyes, I got all that stuff in it. So wipe that stuff out your eyes, put your feet on the floor, get going, start your morning beverage, get that morning Joe brewing. It's time to get going. And Santita, as you said, certainly we wish all of those who practice the Christian faith a blessed Resurrection Day after a Holy Week to all of our Jewish brothers and sisters. Hope you had a blessed Passover observance. They run in parallel, and we're grateful. And then even for our Muslim brothers and sisters, in a few weeks, we'll have Ramadan upon us.
Yes.
It's just a season of renewal. It is a season of renewal. So here's what I wanted to share with you. I'll give you the nuggets of kind of yesterday's message. Regardless of your observance, I'm going to give you the points. We'll kind of roll with it, but I just need to tell you some things that I hope will inspire you on this Monday about how you should approach this season. One is, and I'll give you two words. I need you to stay amazed. Stay amazed. One of the stories about resurrection is that the three women, Mary Magdalene, Mary, mother of James, and Salome, they get up and they go to the tomb. We know that story. But there's some things about how they approach what they were doing that I think we ought to glean from this morning about how we ought to approach life. The text tells us that after the Sabbath had ended, they didn't bring spices, they bought spices. They were prepared for what it was they were intending to do. The first thing I want to say to you about today is that you need to make sure that you're prepared for what it is that you want to achieve. Don't wait for it to happen by happenstance. Don't just think it's going to be luck or fate. Be intentional about how you're prepared for what it is that you want to achieve on today. The second thing they did was they demonstrated that they were determined. Remember, as they're going, they're asking themselves the question of who's going to roll the stone away. They know they've got a big problem that they're going to have to confront. Most of us would have stopped right then. Well, son, child, you know, if it's a big stone there, I ain't going to waste all my energy to go all the way there and not be able to move that stone. They better tell me who's going to be there to move that stone before I get all the way there. I ain't going to put on all these clothes and go through all that. They didn't have none of that conversation. They were determined that in spite of the challenge they knew they might encounter, they were still going to be in place regardless. Don't let what you believe might stop you. Keep going. Don't just be prepared, be determined. When they got there, here's the thing that just amazed me, and it should amaze you. By the time they got within the eyesight of the place they were going, the problem that they thought they had already been resolved. And this is what I want to say to you this morning. On this Monday morning, the text says they left the tomb in fear and trembling. The word there says they were basically fascinated. It means then that God had blown their mind. That's what this season's all about. The Passover is about God blowing our mind. The resurrection is about God blowing our mind. God wants to blow your mind about what God wants to do in your life. And so if you are prepared and determined, I need you to get ready, because determination and preparation is going to lead you to fascination. I need you to get ready to see what God's going to do in your midst and in your life. And I need you to get excited on Monday. I need you to be prepared, be determined, but get ready. God's going to show you something, and it's going to be something good. Don't worry about the problem. You do your part. Let God do God's part, and the rest of it, they say, will indeed be part of your testimony and history. And so I want you to have a great week. Don't let nothing stop you now. I'm praying with and for you that this is going to be the best day of your life. Now go live it, and live it intentionally, and we'll talk soon. Have a great day, Santita.
We love you, Reverend Dr. Todd Geary. Gets us. If you don't drink coffee, that was your jolt. I love it. I love it. I love it. Reverend Dr. Todd Geary, the pastor of the Douglas Memorial Community Church in Baltimore. He's also the senior vice president of Rainbow Push, and we're so blessed to have him all over the country and all over the world. Dr. Deborah Fur Holden, happy Easter. I'm so glad to hear your voice. The Associate Dean of Public Health at Michigan State University. We've got a lot to talk about with COVID-19. These stories keep shifting. And now we heard at the beginning of last week that from the CDC director that if you've been fully vaccinated, you don't need to wear masks this weekend with other people who are fully vaccinated. The CDC walked it back that afternoon. Now AstraZeneca, our government has disabused them of the notion that they will produce their own vaccine because of this blow up in the in the developmental center last week in Baltimore. 15 million doses have to be destroyed. Wow. Dr. Deborah Fur Holden, where are we with our protocols? More and more people have been vaccinated. And yet we're being given mixed messages. I know you feel like you sound like you're a broken record, but you're not. A lot of us are not getting the right messages, Dr. Deborah Fur Holden.
Hey, good morning. I'm really disappointed in the CDC for doing that because it's taken a whole lot of work to try to restore and repair their reputation. You know, remember the CDC had just a terrible, incompetent director for the last several years who just was unwilling to just do the job and stand up to the resistance that he was getting for doing the job and putting good information out. So now I think the pendulum is swinging too far the other way. People are too focused on trying to give people hope. And I just don't think hope is something that we should be giving to people. I think hope is something that people should be able to generate for themselves.
You get that from your pastor, not from your physician. I just need the truth. That's all I need. And so when Dr. Deborah Fur Holden, see, that's part of the problem. You know, because hope is not something that we should ever go past because it keeps you going. But hope is a verb. Okay? I need you as a physician. I don't need you to inspire me. If you tell me the truth is inspiring on its own. That's all I need. So what are people supposed to do when they have been vaccinated? If they've gotten the single dose vaccine or if they've gotten both doses, how long do you have to wait? And because my understanding is that you're still supposed to wear masks. You're still supposed to wash your hands. You're still supposed to be physically distanced from people, not only to protect you from them, because you can still get the virus, you can still develop COVID-19, you can still transmit the virus. Am I wrong with any of this? Please help me.
No, you're exactly right. And let me just give the people just a little bit of the why. Because I think if people really understand how things work, they can make decisions that work for them, that work the best for them, okay? So the vaccine will greatly reduce the chances that if you become exposed, that you will actually contract the virus. Okay, it does do that. It doesn't take it down to zero, but it does significantly reduce it. We can no longer say with certainty what that number looks like, because remember, these vaccines were tested mainly on the original strain of the virus. And now we've got these variants that are out. So let's just set variants to the side. Variants are not the biggest or the worst thing happening, but it's a problem, right? But it's natural. All viruses mutate, all of them. Some more than others. Depends on what type of virus it is. This just looks like it happens to be one that mutates a little more readily, and it mutated a lot faster than we thought it would, okay? Those mutations take hold, it's called a variant. So we've got variant strains, okay? Those variant strains are very similar to the original strain, but a couple of pieces of it look different. B117 are particular places on the genetic chain where the virus has changed up a little bit. That's the position, right? That's the position on the virus where it's changed up a bit. Okay, so the original strain, the vaccine was very good at preventing you, if you got exposed, from getting sick. Why? Because your body would jump into action and stop the virus from replicating in the first place. That's the difference between getting the virus and getting the disease. Okay, so the vaccine is good at your body immediately jumping into gear and stopping the virus from replicating, so you won't get the disease. There is a small likelihood, it's not trivial, but that you could pass the virus on to somebody else, either during that period where your body's fighting quickly to stop it from replicating, or this is the real tricky part, the little short time window when one might breathe it in and breathe it out. Remember, this is something that we breathe in and breathe out. So if you breathe it in and then you, go to the store and you pick up some food or some groceries or some things from the store, then you go over to a relative's house for a party and you breathe out what you just breathed in on others, you could actually have only been carrying the virus for just, 30 minutes. It's just hanging out there in your nasal passageway. And you could breathe it in and breathe it out on somebody else. So that possibility always exists, even for people who are vaccinated, even if the vaccine is working optimally. And then there are people who will actually get exposed, will contract the virus, will develop the disease, but it'll be very mild. It'll be very low grade because your body has a good immune response already ready to fight it off when you get exposed. So that's how that would look. So then what does that mean if you're around a bunch of other vaccinated people? Well, if people choose to say, well, you know what we've done, and they're saying zero, whenever anybody puts anything in absolute 100%, 0%, I always raise my eyebrow. But they're saying this will prevent death. The vaccine will prevent people from dying. So that's a good thing. And they say it will greatly reduce the chances of people getting sick, right? Severe illness. Mm-hmm. So if you were around a whole bunch of other vaccinated people and everybody in the room is vaccinated, the chances of one of y'all spreading it to each other is really, really low.
I got 1 minute.
But that's on people to make that choice. Yeah, whether or not they want to relax and everybody be unmasked. If everybody was vaccinated and being safe when they're outside in the world, that's probably something that people can do. But people need to understand how and why that would work and under what conditions versus getting this blanket recommendation.
That's why you're not a broken record. When you give it to us this way, it makes sense. Then I know what the risks are. I know what I can and cannot do, what this vaccine does and does not do. That's all we need. When you know that, then there won't be fights in public, because this is what's beginning to happen between people who are vaccinated and not vaccinated. And just the information. I got 30 seconds. What do you want to say?
With more vaccine available, I'm really encouraging people. We're reaching this weird point where a lot of places have vaccine supply and aren't able to get it into people's arms. We had that happen in my county. They say they've exhausted our 80,000 person wait list, and we've got a big supply that's come in today, and we've only got about half of the appointments taken up. So I encourage people, check out your local health department website. If you are interested in getting vaccinated, trust me, it'll be better to be vaccinated if you can track this virus than not. That's the real deal, bottom line on that.
Dr. Deborah
So reach out to your local health department.
Find out, everybody. Dr. Deborah Holden, Associate Dean of Public Health at Michigan State University, giving you the information you need on COVID-19 and all matters of public health. Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show. What about this boycott of Georgia and Georgia products? Is it a good idea or not? Will that shift the needle on these laws? Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show in just a minute. Dr. Deb, how you doing?
I'm doing all right. How you doing?
Oh, I'm so glad to hear your voice. Oh, okay. Girl, I've got to run out of here. I've got a hard out at 8 o'clock today. Hard out. I'm going to meet my father for his therapy. Bless his heart.
Oh, gotcha.
His voice therapy.
Gotcha. How was Easter?
Oh, it was great. And I'll tell you, the gift for me was that I got a chance to do his some of the vocal therapy with him this weekend. Okay. And he said he had not been worked like that. He said they didn't even do this when I was at the. I said, I'm a trained concert singer, and I've had to have therapy, a few times. I said, so I know what you have to do, and the strength, to be a preacher takes that kind of wind power. It's not a sick man's game or woman's game. You got to be able to speak, and because you're using your voice. You're just not singing. You're speaking. And so he said by the time when he woke up Sunday morning, he said my stomach and my chest was sore. I said, good.
Yeah.
I said, so I'm going to meet with him and the people today and say, now when I'm with him, I'm pushing him, and I'm going to be with him every day, 5 or 6 days a week.
Yeah.
I said, no, I'm going to push you. He looked at me. I said, no. And I made him repeat until he
sending Attorney Patillo and Attorney halfway through.
If he didn't have it right, I said, you didn't do it. I said, it doesn't count until you do it properly. Boom. How about that? So, girl, I'm going to let you go. So this was my weekend, okay? Oh, my God. Oy. So, but I'm sending you much love. I'm sending you much, 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 much love. Sending you much, much, much love. I'm so glad to hear your voice. Glad to hear your voice. I love you. So you might be hearing from me later today.
All right. Y'all have a great show.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. I'm going to reach out to you when I get back from dealing with my daddy.
Okay.
Love you, babe.
I'm back. Bye-bye.
Hey, Attorney Hoffler and Attorney Patillo.
Good morning.
I'm sending you much love. How are you?
I'm great. I hope you had a great Easter.
Look, I told you the highlight for me was doing a speech therapy with my dad. I pushed him so hard.
Wonderful.
He said his stomach and his chest were sore. I said, yeah, because I'm pushing you. Oh, I said, no. I said, you're a vocal athlete. I know it because I am too. I said, you got to push. I said, you're not doing this correctly. Girl, he had to do repetitions of 5 sets 5 times. And I would not let him get through.
Wow.
60 seconds.
I said, if you don't do it correctly, I said, we'll start again. Sorry. You know what? I had a 10-page paper due. I was like 10 years of age. And it was due that Monday. We had a substitute teacher, but she was like the regular sub at our school. You know what my father did? He gave me no sympathy. He said, oh, well, if you start tonight, you might get 5 pages done, baby. So, okay. That was my weekend. And I got 6 pages done. He said, wow. So if you continue to work, you might almost have 20 done by Monday. Daddy's so proud of you. Hey, Robert. How you doing, Mr. Patillo? Yeah, So I was returning the favor. At the side of the crime, our old dining room table. That was it. How you doing, Robert Patillo?
10 seconds, everyone.
I'm great.
Okay, we need you just a little louder, okay?
No problem. Sorry, I had the mic turned down a little bit.
Okay.
Morning.
Hey, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. WCPT 820 in Chicago, AM 950 Radio, Minneapolis, St. Paul. We're going to be talking about the George Floyd case at the top of the hour. And of course, this is the 53rd anniversary of the assassination of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. What would he think about all of this that we're dealing with right now? What would he think? And what was his real legacy? Got to talk about that today. And but starting with Georgia. Now, I went to lunch with my oldest friend in the world, bless her heart. We went out on Saturday and we had a lovely time. And when we were at the restaurant, I said, okay, because I wanted a soda. Um, and I said, well, are these Coke products? They said yes. I said, oh no. I said, I'm not going to do Coke products until Coca-Cola is even more forceful, even though we don't have a formal boycott. And then she jumped. She said, oh, I understand. I said, okay. I said, until they help me get my vote back in Georgia, uh, just the threat of the boycotts work, actually. And so Stacey Abrams said, okay, you're right. Boycotts, historically, they have been used, but maybe we should just wait to negotiate with these companies. Well, now Ilhan Omar, Congresswoman from my city, Minneapolis, St. Paul, she said, no, we do need to use these boycotts because they've been used to great effect. So what do you think? Call me or text me at 773 WCPT, 773-763-9278. Of course, GWC Injury Lawyers gives you the opportunity to text. But I want to hear from you. What do you think about this? Major League Baseball, very quickly, in short order, they are relocating the All-Star game. Wow, in response to the threat of boycotts. Tim Cook from Apple, all of these people are coming out, and they're coming out against the changes in laws that will restrict voters' voting rights. So, I've got attorney C.K. Hoffler. She and attorney Robert Patillo are based in Atlanta, although they are national and international figures. She is the president of the National Bar Association, the largest and oldest black bar association in the world, chair of Rainbow Push, and she is also the host of her own radio show tomorrow, every Tuesday at 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, Law and Legal with C.K. Hoffler, and of course, Robert Patillo every Sunday for 3 hours from 1 to 4 on WAOK. You don't want to miss his show either. Let me start with you. What is going on with this boycott? Let me start with you because you just talked with people yesterday, Attorney Robert Patillo. What are people saying? Are people boycotting? Do they support it? What are people down on the ground in Georgia saying? Because of course, Stacey Abrams said this could hurt Georgians who would benefit from the monies that these events would bring to Georgia.
Well, this is a bottom-up movement. This is something where there's leadership listening to the streets as opposed to the streets listening to leadership on the boycott. And we can't forget what happened in 2020. We had record turnout in Georgia. 5 million people nearly voted in the general election. We had record turnout in the runoff election to support Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff in the United States Senate. And I think there's been a very bold and blanketed and obvious attempt to suppress those votes. When you have those 7 white men sitting under a picture of a plantation signing a bill, and the only defense that they've had thus far is, what voter suppression? I didn't sign any voter suppression. I have a black friend who says it's not voter suppression, which is not working with the people in the state of Georgia. We have a more sophisticated political class now. We have a more sophisticated electorate now who are not going to fall for those sorts of things. So the calls for boycott are growing louder. Bishop Jackson with the AME Church is having a press conference tomorrow, I believe, to announce that they will be boycotting. More corporations are beginning the process of pulling out of the state because, similar to apartheid South Africa, nobody wants to be known as the company that was on the side of Jim Crow. Nobody wants to be on the company that's on the side of racial oppression publicly. Simply put, it's a bad PR look when you spent all of last year putting out T-shirts and slogans, and you need urban markets going forward. Nobody is standing up in favor of the Georgia voter suppression law. So you're going to see an increasingly isolated Republican Party in Georgia. We saw the press conference that they held on Saturday, where they got together their little cadre to say, and it's interesting to me that instead of defending it from a policy position, they just put out a statement with a bunch of Newsmax and OAN and Fox News and Breitbart talking points. And instead of talking about the vote for the people of the state of Georgia, they're talking about cancel culture and woke liberal institutions and Abrams, and we're not going to be bullied, and we're standing up to the mob, which is fine if you only exist in that conservative media talking point sphere. But we saw a similar thing with President Trump, where he had spent 4 years only within that silo of information. And then when he got out of that for the general election, he couldn't talk to the American people. He's still talking about the deep state and all of these other things where the average American voter has no idea what the hell you're talking about. And that's how Governor Kemp and Speaker Ralston sounded on Saturday. So we're in a situation where Cobb County is already going to lose out on an estimated $100 million by the All-Star game moving and the MLB draft moving. We're having other corporations that are pulling their conferences, pulling their events from the state of Georgia until that time. But what the real hit is going to be is if Hollywood says that they're going to stop producing movies, or if the music industry says they're going to stop producing records in Atlanta, then it's game over, because that is a big chunk of the economy of the state. And at this point, Republicans have to figure out whether or not this is the racism fine that we always talk about. When we say that people would much rather pay the fine than stop being racist, look, we're fine paying $20-30 million to shoot black people every couple of years. That's the fine for the racism. This is that racism fine kicked up to another notch, because the Republican Party is going to have to determine whether or not voter suppression is worth the hundreds of millions going into the billions of dollars that it will cost them as you continue to have sports, entertainment, movie production, conferences leave the state just over a voter suppression law, which they have no reason or no justification to create other than liberal cancel culture and wokeism, which I don't think will be compelling to the corporations losing money. So this is the hill that Brian Kemp decided he wanted to die on, but I don't think it's going to work for him, because we're seeing the tides of history turn against this movement that they created.
Attorney C.K. Hoffler, it does seem like this is a bottom-up movement. People are not waiting on, elected officials or people with, the high-profile names to consider a boycott. It seems that, is it your sense that people are willing to make this sacrifice in Georgia?
I do think, and good morning, Santita, and Robert, I do think that it is a bottom-up movement. I do think that many people, are willing to make the sacrifice, because they believe that if we don't make the sacrifice, we will go back to what it was like before Jim Crow. And a lot of people view it that way. It's very interesting. You can have an intellectual discussion when you don't live in Georgia. It's quite invigorating and you can debate back and forth. But when you live here, it's real. And I believe this is oppression at its best. So they're not going to wait for the elected officials to pontificate about the pros and cons. And the one thing that I will show that this does demonstrate is that the black political machinery, if you will, is not necessarily one monolithic group. The fact that Stacey Abrams does say, "Wait a minute," she's saying, "I'm glad that Major League Baseball is taking this position. I'm not necessarily in favor of a boycott, and I'm sorry that the money is going to leave the state because it's going to hurt the least of these." And others are very, very proactive and vehemently disagree with her about that. There's nothing wrong with that per se, but I do think in this instance, the people are going to speak, and they're in favor of the boycott. And by the way, the boycotts are implemented by the people. It's the people, if they are the ones who decide not to drink Coca-Cola products, if they are the ones who decide not to fly Delta Airlines or not to fly United or not to fly American, That is where the difference is going to be made. It's not per se what the politicians, if you will, or the elected officials will do. Now, that does not mean that people aren't listening to the elected officials, aren't swayed by the elected officials. Stacey Abrams has a lot of power, a lot of respect, a lot of clout, and she certainly has paid her dues in Georgia, but people are allowed to disagree. And that's what's happening. And I think her point, I can see her point. I may not agree with her point, but I can see her point, which is that it's going to ultimately affect the least of these as well, because all this money leaving, jobs are leaving. But I have to tell you, I want to see what Tyler Perry, for instance, is going to do. I'd like to see what T.I. is going to do. These are people who are folkloric heroes, Hollywood style here in Georgia. So let's see where they're coming out and what positions they're going to take. And because people follow them, like T.I., the people are going to follow T.I. much more than they might follow, say, a political person, because he's somebody who comes from the bottom up, if you will. And so I'd be interested in seeing what position they take, because I think that that's going to inform more people's decision to support the boycott. But there is a schism. And I think, that's just the nature of the beast. We're not, as a black political machinery, we're not a monolithic group. People have different views. And I believe historically boycotts have made the difference in the world. Until you apply financial pressure, you just have some pressure that may or may not be persuasive. It's on some level, just the threat of a boycott has been working. It's getting the Republican Party stirred up. They recognize they cannot just disenfranchise voters without there being any consequence. And it's going to continue. So I think at the end of the day, there must be the passage of the federal legislation, because that's going to be the only thing that will make a difference in this. So I think that we have to fight on all levels, but from the bottom up boycott, that's one way of fighting. And I think that it's something that that's going to happen anyway. I think the boycott at some level is going to happen, whether people like it or not, or agree with it or not. And so we have to brace ourselves for that.
Well, yes, go on, Robert.
I don't know. I was going to say that it's kind of like the verses last night, where you have the Isley Brothers on one hand, you have Earth, Wind, and Fire on the other hand. Earth, Wind, and Fire is going to be smooth and exciting and passionate, and and all those things, which is kind of the political class in Georgia when it comes to fighting against the voter suppression. And I love it. One of my favorite groups on earth. The Isley Brothers are going to come in with that energy. They're going to hit you across the top of the head with it. They're going to surprise you. Ronald Isley is going to pop up a beard out of nowhere, and you're not going to know what's happening. That's the street.
Oh, Mr. Big
showing up to protest. Yeah, so we're going
to. That's interesting.
It's rich.
Now that's interesting. I don't know. I would have had that analogy, but I do think the contrast. I mean, in terms of the musicians, but I do think the contrast. I mean, if you had said Bootsy Collins, Funkadelic. I mean, I think if you're
now wait a minute, you're taking us far. No, I can't believe you'd be talking about Bootsy. Not you. No.
Funkadelic, One Nation Under Groove, and Flashlight. I mean, if you were talking about that, I would understand. But anyway, I love the Isley Brothers. I love Earth, Wind, and Fire. But the contrast for me would be One Nation Under Groove. That's the equivalent of, that's the boycott language. One Nation Under Groove, getting down just for the funk of it. I mean, I think that's for the
One Nation.
So anyway,
and
I know
we're on the move, and nothing can stop us now.
Nothing can stop us now.
Hey.
Yes.
With all that. But see, everyone, you all need to understand that in CK's other life, she is also a rapper. I want you to know. Robert, we're going to pull that video where this girl came out, and in her beaded pantsuit, she was clean at the Board of Health. And she, for an audience of the upper crust of Atlanta, broke out into Rapper's Delight. Couldn't believe it, okay? But now, back in the day, just to be fair, we all knew Rapper's Delight. We used to rap that on the bus coming home from Whitney Young. Yes. Who knew all of the verses? But really, and we are in a verses, but it's It's versus, it's, I think that our politics are maturing, you know, Robert and CK and Robert. We have gone from our elected leadership, I think we're putting them into their proper context because our elected leadership, we elected them to represent us. We didn't elect them to follow them. We elected them to do what we need you to do. And so now we appreciate Stacey Abrams' point because we get that. We get that. And she's also running for governor, and we want her to become governor. But on the ground, she won't be governor if our right to vote for her has been restricted. So somebody's got to do something, Robert. I mean, Robert, you, and then you, CK. I mean, somebody's got to do something because what we've got now is not working.
Well, I think it's a situation where everybody has to do everything, because we have to attack it from every angle. Because when we talk about Georgia going back to Jim Crow, we forget that we're already in a Jim Crow posture right now. So we're starting from Jim Crow, because I think this is the problem with how we teach history in this country. That people think Jim Crow was just one big law passed in like 1850 that said Jim Crow on it. No, it was a series of laws and actions over the course of decades to slowly rob African Americans of the right to vote in the franchise after the Civil War. As directly after the Civil War during Reconstruction, prior to the Posse Comitatus and the Hayes-Tillman Compromise in 1876, you had African Americans elected officials in the South. You had black governors, black senators, black congresspeople. That's why whenever a black person gets elected in the South, we say it's the first time since Reconstruction that an African American has done X, Y, and Z. So it's not as if we simply did not have rights. They just took them away slowly over the course of time, and none of that was based on one singular law. Georgia, 20 years ago, if people remember, we had governors like Roy Barnes, who was a Democrat. We had governors like Zell Miller, who was a Democrat. We had Democratic senators. We had statewide officials like Thurber Baker and Michael Thurman, who were African Americans who were Democratic. This was up until we started passing Jim Crow laws, like the voter ID law that passed in 2004, that was struck down by the courts in 2005 as a poll tax because they were charging $10 for an ID. And then in 2006, they reformed it where you still had the voter ID, but they took away the poll tax aspect of it. Democrats have not won a statewide election since then until Warnock in Ossoff in January of 2021. So from 2006, when Thurber Baker won last, until January 2021, just because of that voter ID law putting in place, and they gave Republicans a constitutional majority in the House, a constitutional majority in the Senate, the governor's mansion, the state judiciary, and every single statewide seat. So then in 2011, they had to reinforce after redistricting in 2010, they reinforced and spread voter suppression, continuing the Jim Crow. So we're already into decade 2 of Jim Crow legislation. Now in 2021, since the Jim Crowness is running out, this is just reinvigorating the Jim Crow that's already in place. So it's not as if we are trying to get back to the default place of not being discriminated against. We're just trying to get back to the Jim Crow 1.0 that we've been in for the last 20 years, and that's what they're fighting against right now. So it's going to take everybody from the streets to the boardrooms to the political offices to the corporations to fight back against this. Because what happens? We have what happens to a dream deferred? We saw that last summer across the country, where you tell people they can't march, they can't picket, they can't boycott, you're not going to respect their votes, you're not going to listen to them. What option do you leave them after that? And I think we had enough broken windows and boarded up buildings in Georgia and burned down this, that, and the other. You think you money from a boycott, you lose a whole lot more money from a city being on fire. So we have to stop pretending that the people will not storm the Bastille. So when the political class thinks that they can deny what the streets want, we saw last year that the streets will always end up getting what the people believe in.
Streets will win. Attorney C.K. Hoffler, your thoughts?
Well, I just think that we have to be real. I agree with Robert. We have to be everywhere. I've always said it's going to take a tripartite approach. We have to be in the courts, we have to be in the streets, and we have to be in the legislation, in the federal legislation. And so that's what it's going to take. And I personally don't think I may not agree with it, but I don't think it's terribly problematic that we have political leaders that differ on boycott. John Ossa flat out just said there's no value and he opposes it vehemently and all that kind of stuff. He takes a much more aggressive position against boycotting than Stacey Abrams does. Stacey Abrams has sort of a qualified approach. I think that she's saying, well, boycotts have been effective in the past. I don't deny that. They've been very effective during the civil rights movement for South Africa, all that. I don't deny that. We just have to have a plan so that the least of these aren't hurt. I think Stacey Abrams is rolling this out. And others are just flat out in favor of the boycott. I am in favor of the boycott, personally. I think the boycott can be effective. The National Bar is going to roll out its plan and what it feels it does need to do this week. We have our conference that begins this Friday, the Go to Rush conference. And that's going to be something we're going to talk about and announce what our plan and strategy is. So because it's not just in Georgia. Georgia's the poster child, but because we are a national organization, have affiliate chapters in 80 affiliate chapters throughout the country, what we announce will be implemented in our chapters because if 46 states are doing this, we don't just need a strategy in Georgia. So it's got to be everywhere, but certainly we look at what's happening in Georgia. The Gertrude Rush Conference, although it's virtual, was intended to be in Atlanta, is planned by Georgians, is inspired by what's happening in Georgia. So I think that this country really needs to brace itself for boycotts or even the threat of a boycott. And I think that it is having the desired impact because a lot of companies have stepped up to the plate. They have modified their position. They have reversed themselves because it really boils down to, are you in favor of Black people not voting or are you not? We don't need to sugarcoat what it is. It's, are you in favor? Do you believe that Black people should vote in Georgia or not? Black people, brown people, young people. Should black and brown people, that's really what it is. It's not, the Constitution of the Constitution. That's not the discussion. It's, are you in favor of Black and brown people and young people voting in the state of Georgia, yes or no? And if the answer is no, you fall into one category. There are gray areas in that discussion from my standpoint. So there might be some nuances that one could talk about intellectually, but the bottom line is that. And the bottom line is, as we've been saying, the people in the street, the people who are there living this every day, I believe that's how they see it.
Well, and I also know that as she talks about negotiating with the corporations, your negotiations go better when people are picketing outside. Otherwise, they're not paying any attention to you. They don't have to pay attention to you. The threat of people pulling out of Georgia, this young lady who was our server, she couldn't have been 25. Young white girl. When I said, oh, you have Coke products? I said, oh, no, I won't be having those. She said, oh, I understand. I said, oh, okay, this is a nice restaurant. I said, yeah, if they don't want to protect my vote, I'm not going to give them my patronage. And it was just that simple. And let me tell you something, everybody. If you think that street heat does not matter, think again. Ask the Montgomery Bus Boycott. The Montgomery Bus Boycott, those buses were made in Chicago. That was a Chicago company. They started getting pressure everywhere. The corporate community started feeling it when those Black people decided to not take the bus for a year. It takes that kind of sacrifice, everybody. So you know what? I want you to stick around for a hot second, everybody, because we're going to be talking about the George Floyd case. What do you think about the death of George Floyd? How do you think that seeing all of that footage last week, how did that impact you? How has that impacted everybody? I mean, we went into the week starting that, it was 8 minutes and 46 seconds. Yeah, that was awful. Then we saw the footage. It was 9 minutes and 29 seconds and counting. And then you saw the body cam footage. So you got a chance to be on George Floyd's back. You saw the whole encounter. It was a whole lot, everybody. And yet, so much of this trial might come down to his health. Was it the knee on the neck or the drugs that might have been in his system? How's that going to work out? And then, what is the true legacy of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King? Someone who believed in the street heat. He believed in negotiation, education, negotiation, then demonstration. Okay? We're going to negotiate our way out of the boycott again. So what do you think? But I want to hear what you are thinking is going to happen with this Derrick Chovin trial. That's right. He's the one who's on trial. And would you be surprised to know that he has a way, CK and Robert, that through the years, his response to arresting suspects is choking them. But that's not being allowed in the court case. I read that in a USA Today article just this past weekend. He chokes people. George Floyd is not the only person he's done this to. But this time, they kind of got the wrong one. More of the Santita Jackson Show. Call me at 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. Santita Jackson Show, WCPT 820 and AM 950 Radio, Minneapolis, St. Paul. Back in just a few minutes. Okay. Let me go to Doyle. Doyle?
Sending him through now, Trey.
Thank you so much. Doyle?
Yes, Ms. Jackson.
Hi, how are you?
Very well, Ms. Jackson.
Good, honey. I didn't want to get off topic, but what you had a comment about vaccines?
Well, that was when I was listening. All it was, I can switch topics brilliantly, but I wanted to say, again, I'm that 14-year-old that went with your father to Iowa where they told him, Jesse, we're not ready yet. So what I was going to say was, every Saturday leaving 5050 South Drexel, after your father would lay down what needed to be done for the week, our family would travel to the health food stores in Hyde Park because my mother was raised away and then came to Chicago and switched to a naturalist life. So as a Marine Corps veteran, I've only had one vaccine, and that was to get into the Marine Corps. Other than that, I believe in free will.
Okay.
Just simply that.
You know what? Would you like to have a discussion on this show about whether they should be mandated or not? Would you like to have that discussion? Because
absolutely, Ms. Jackson, because I love the openness as always. You are truly your father's daughter. You don't take one position. You just allow people to speak their view, and you're respectful of that.
No, let me say this. Reverend has taken positions, and so do I, but we respect people. We don't believe in rolling over people. But Reverend has always taken very, very firm stands. But what separates him from many others is that he is respectful of other people's positions.
Absolutely.
Now, as a talk show host,
Absolutely.
I do have very firm beliefs and stances, and you hear them. But what I don't want to do is use this powerful microphone to mute your voice, right? I don't agree with that.
No, that's the reason why, again, you're the preferred show between 6 and 8. I wish that Nielsen tracked realistically because you have a lot of racially diverse. I'd have to put that because people use the word diversity. You have racially diverse listeners who love these 2 hours. It goes great with coffee in the morning. So I feel that in relation to vaccines, I just am one of those individuals that allows individuals to free will. However, you're going to return your body to Christ. Because that's what it boils down to. God gives you a body. How you return that body to Christ, to God, is up to you. You'll be held accountable for it.
So you want to have
Other
that
than
discussion,
that,
Doyle.
everything else is related. Floyd is straight from 50 South Drexel.
Okay, I'm just trying to get this because you determine what we're going to talk about every day. When I hear from you all, I try to listen. So you would like to have that discussion because overseas they're saying no jab, no job. So what happens in Europe, it trickles down, it trickles over here across the pond, and so you're saying that's troubling to you.
Sure. Well, Ms. Jackson, as due respect, upon leaving 50 Central every Saturday, we would take a walk past Minister Farrakhan's mansion. And my thing at the end of the day is the minister has his stance out against vaccines for people to respectfully make a decision for their own body. What I've noticed in the last 24 hours, and I'll be brief, is individuals complaining about the after effects of the virus, meaning how they are feeling in terms of chills in their body, et cetera, et cetera.
Sure.
I cannot
Sending Dwight and Jonathan through.
understand how they feel because, again, I've only had one vaccine in my body, and that was May 22nd, 1989 in San Diego, California, at Dayton Boot Camp.
Okay.
So,
well, I'm gonna have to run, Doyle. I'm sorry, baby. I've got to go.
Absolutely, I appreciate.
Right, absolutely. You have to go be you. Be
No,
successful, be spectacular,
no, sweetie, I just have to get back on the air. That's all. But you know what? I want you to call tomorrow morning. Call about 6:15, okay? And I promise you, I'll be on the air. Yep. Well, because we're gonna about 6:19. We'll be going right into COVID Q&A, and I'd love for you to share your views right at the top of that. Okay?
We are your producer at 6:15.
Absolutely. Just I have no.
And one more thing.
Yes, I got a minute.
Did you get your T-shirt in terms of remember I called on your brother's birthday and I said there is a T-shirt coming on that Kappa specifically designed it for you.
No.
Did you get your T-shirt?
No, but I would love it. But but look, so many things could have happened. But let's talk tomorrow, okay?
What's the best way to communicate in terms of what's your best email?
Send me a DM on sjackson@wcpt820.com.
You'll see a connecting email and we'll go from there. Have a blessed Monday.
Okay, thank you, sweetie.
Take care.
You touched me today. Thank you so much. Absolutely. Jonathan Jackson?
Just like you touched up.
Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. And we have got Dwight McKee. Is Dwight there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
CK, you still there?
I'm still here.
Oh, wow. Okay, Rob Patillo, great. Well, we're going to get right into.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, we're going to get right into this trial. I want to hear what your thoughts are. Jonathan has been up in Minneapolis, and he knows a lot of people up there, so it'll be very interesting to get his reflections. But I'm so glad that all of you are here with us today. And Doyle, thank you for calling in. You're such a sweetheart. You're such a sweetheart. We're going to have these discussions about vaccines because clearly they are concerning to you. And if they're concerning to you, this is your platform and we will talk about that, okay? I promise you. And call me tomorrow morning, bright and early, so we can make that happen. But right now we're going to be talking about this Derrick Chovin. He is on trial for the killing of George Floyd. Will he be convicted?
60 seconds, everyone.
Most police officers are not convicted in cases like these. They're just not. So that's the data. So let's stay right here on the Santita Jackson Show, everybody. That's nice. All right. I can hear something in the background, so you all make sure that everything is quiet in the background. Even when you're shuffling papers or moving anything around, we can hear everything, which means the audience can hear it. So thank you all so much. Stay right here.
Ten seconds, everyone.
Thank you, Devin.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Hey, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. It's April 5th, 2021. I'm Santita Jackson. I'm coming to you from AM 950 Radio, Minneapolis, St. Paul, and WCPT 820 in Chicago, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station. AM 950 Radio, of course, is the voice of progressive Minnesota. We're going to be talking about an event that is happening there, everybody. Everybody, the whole world is watching the Derrick Chauvin trial. So I want to know what you're thinking about that. Call me or text me at 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. If you want to text GWC Injury Lawyers. They are the people who are making that happen. And so we want to hear from you. And I want you to meet my morning stars on the Santita Jackson and Friends page. Please like me over there and then go to the Santita Jackson Show YouTube page. It's a new page and many of you are joining. Please like and subscribe. Everybody, let's get to some of these headlines as we talk about Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, assassinated 53 years ago yesterday. And, of course, the Derrick Chauvin trial, which will start up in just a couple hours. Chicago, we're going to have a high of 73 degrees. It's going to be a beautiful day. Scattered showers, though. And then Minneapolis, St. Paul, 81 degrees, mostly sunny. Well, the International Monetary Fund has told us something that we all know. They warn that up to 6 million children in emerging markets and developing economies could drop out of school in 2021. The poorest families, according to this report, have been hit particularly hard, and the damage to education could last for years, everybody, because of this pandemic. Everyone in England will be offered twice weekly COVID tests, according to this new plan from Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister of Great Britain. And AstraZeneca, well, after they have been strongly rebuked about the efficacy of their vaccines, they've released new data supporting their vaccines. They said that their vaccines are highly effective, 76% effective. In the meantime, the United States government has put Johnson & Johnson in charge of a plant that ruined 15 million doses of its COVID-19 vaccine. They have stopped the British drug maker AstraZeneca from using the facility. They will not be touching their vaccines. Wow, what about that, everybody? And okay, let's get to what's happening in Georgia. What is happening in Georgia? Well, the Major League Baseball has decided to move the All-Star game and the draft from Atlanta. They are feeling it. In the meantime, Ilhan Omar has stepped out, and she is at odds with Stacey Abrams over the Georgia All-Star Game boycott. Now, Abrams last week wrote an op-ed piece that was published nationally. She said, we know that boycotts should be respected. And although I don't want to see Georgia families hurt by lost events and jobs, Georgians targeted by voter suppression will be hurt as opportunities go to other states. We should not abandon the victims of Republican malice and lies. We must all stand together. In the meantime, Ilhan Omar said that we know that boycotts have allowed for justice to be delivered in many spaces. The civil rights movement was rooted in boycotts. We know that apartheid ended in South Africa because of boycotts. So our hope is that this boycott will result in changes in the law, because we understand that when you restrict people's abilities to vote, you create a democracy that isn't fully functioning. What do you think about that, everybody? Facebook data, they had a hacking. 500 million people had their most personal information taken by hackers, including Mark Zuckerberg. Were you in that group? And wow, what's happening with Amazon? Well, drivers have sometimes had to relieve themselves in bottles. Wow. Now, of course, Jeff Bezos has come out and he's apologized for that. But what is going on at Amazon? In the meantime, the young man who ran the gates at the Capitol, in which we saw another U.S. Capitol officer killed, Noah Green, died as well. And our hats go off to the girls, the ladies of Stanford. They defeated Arizona to win the first NCAA women's title since 1992. So, everybody, let's get to the Derrick Chovin trial. That's right. Who's on trial? Derrick Chovin is on trial, not George Floyd. But is that really true? I mean, think about that, everybody. We're finding that as the defense will put on their case, they're going to make the drug use of George Floyd the issue. They're going to say that, no, he didn't die because he had the knee of this officer ground into his neck for 9 minutes and 29 seconds. It's because he might have had something in his system. So what do you think about that, everybody? What do you think about this compelling testimony that we saw? What do you think of the fact that Derrick Chauvin used force, choking force, against suspects before George Floyd? It happened at least 6 times, but the jury's not going to hear that. They're not going to hear when he choked suspects, when he put his knee on the necks of suspects. You're not going to hear any of that. So, I got Jonathan Jackson, the national spokesman for Rainbow Push, and one of the founding members of Operation Push, and the former youth director of Operation Breadbasket, and Operation Push, and someone who's active with the National Action Network and so much now, renowned social scientist Dwight McKee, welcoming them as attorneys C.K. Hoffler and Robert Patillo are with us so they can give us a legal angle. But let me start with you, Jonathan Jackson, because you have been in Minneapolis. You've had your finger on the pulse there. What do you make of what you've seen over the past week?
Thank you, Santita, and happy belated Easter. And let us remember the life of Reverend Martin Luther King. Let's put it in context that Minnesota is at the northern end, is at the beginning of the Mississippi River. It's the same mentality in Minnesota that goes all the way through St. Louis and down to the Gulf and in Mississippi. And what we see at the northern end, at the beginning of the Mississippi, is one of the highest levels of income disparity between the black and the white community anywhere in the nation. So although they have some of the highest income as Minnesotans, they also have some of the greatest disparity in loan rejections for African Americans. They have a large amount, a high level of social benefits. So people that are in rehab and other things have found places of comfort to go up there if you can survive the few cold months that they have. And then specific as it relates to the trial, I just find it interesting. I feel as if George Floyd is on trial. And watching this disgusts me that who knew there were so many cameras from so many angles. I applaud and you see this man getting suffocated, asphyxiated from 100 different angles. And what are they looking for? It's murder. It's something very corrupted. The prosecutor, in my personal opinion, I thought I would have liked to have seen them lead in. Does anybody know if this $20 bill is real or not? I mean, this is what they were called to the scene for. And who knows what $20 bill was in there? So why are they even making the assumption of guilt on George Floyd's association with this $20 bill? I don't know if the person at the cash register changed out the $20 bill. They accepted the money. The police never went to look at the money. They approached the man in the car with the gun who wasn't trying to flee. So I am hopeful that that justice will be served, but the policing should be indicted on the paramedics. Look at the paramedics. This is beginning of the call of the running away from justice. He was dead on the spot. This is where you go from testifying to testifying. The paramedics had a duty to call George Floyd dead on the scene. Not we kept trying to revive him, but we knew he was dead. And then the conspiracy charges ought to come in because they never called for emergency service. The paramedics said they drove over there like it was any other call. They wanted the man to die out and be doubly sure. We saw the same thing happen with Laquan McDonald in Chicago. Although he was shot 16 times, you're supposed to have a 2-minute emergency response with most police and fire departments in the city of Chicago. Laquan McDonald sat on the ground for 45 minutes bleeding out to make sure he was dead.
45
minutes? We saw the same thing happen. Yes. So if you look at the time of death and look at the coroner's report, you'll see the discrepancy. Now, this is the same issue with George Floyd. So you've got to add the time to the hospital onto that 9 minutes and 29 seconds to figure out who could have gone without oxygen for a half an hour.
Stunning. What do you make of Ilhan Omar says that Minneapolis is on edge? We had Spike Moss, a renowned political organizer. Really, he's a man of the people. He said, the city people are not expecting, quite frankly, a conviction, and it seems like the city mothers and fathers are believing that too, because they've walled off the court. They've walled off a lot of these government buildings, Jonathan.
Well, I think they would know better. I think it's going to be pretty hard to convince the public. People have seen the court of public opinion was set a year ago. Everyone saw at that time 8 minutes and 46 seconds. Now that we know more, it's 9 minutes and 29 seconds of the man sticking his hand through his pocket to put additional pressure on his thigh, to put additional pressure on this man's neck, to see him leave his body because he had involuntarily lost his muscle after he had died. I mean, it's one of the greatest acts of bestiality. And here we are from the Tulsa, Oklahoma bombing all the way to 1921, almost 100 years later, we're seeing the same sort of brutality and bestiality. And then my last comment on the policing issue. If it's happening to everybody, that's a policing issue. If these men in guns that are sworn to uphold the law are just doing it to black folks, that's a racism issue. I don't think we can go forward until we call racism exactly what it is. This is racism. And I applaud the boss, the superintendent, or the commander that fired Derrick Chovin. What an act of courage and character. He needs to be exalted because he receives backlash for having told the truth. And isn't it amazing that the quietness, the eerie quietness of all these other law enforcement agencies that don't
condemn Derrick Chauvin? What is this blue wall, this racism wall that we have to now confront? Don't you think police should be out in mass saying we want stricter gun controls? Don't you think police should be out in mass saying what Derrick Chauvin did was wrong and a disgrace to policing? We have a deeper issue that we have to deal with in the racism in policing culture.
Dwight McKee, your thoughts?
Well, the name of Minnesota's football team is the Minnesota Vikings. And the reason they're called the Vikings is because many of the people in Minnesota come from Scandinavian countries. There's a certain Aryan mentality that they brought with them. Anybody who knows about the Vikings knows that they, by their own proclamation, was part of the barbaric tribe, one of the 10 barbarian tribes from out of Europe. And they prided themselves on a certain kind of violence and a certain kind of arrogance and a certain kind of racism that only comes to bear in Minnesota. So I think, again, I always go to culture. I think the culture of Minnesota is as such, is that it creates both that opportunity they have to impose violence on the population, that they seem to have an aggressive problem with that. But it also imposes what we was talking about last week, that Fay mentality, where, you know, they would see this guy King Kong, they would see his girlfriend is Fay Ray, and there would be a certain hostility to all these interracial couples that operate in Minnesota by police departments. And so I just think it became a recipe for disaster and the perfect storm. I think that's what we kind of looking at as the perfect storm. And I think that if they let the real evidence in as of this guy's history of violence, I think it'll be an open and shut case. But again, it goes to the culture. They would do everything they can to protect this policeman.
Which goes to this USA Today report that says that 17 complaints filed with Minneapolis police about Derrick Chauvin, 6 times in which prosecutors say he used force against arrestees. Like this, 6 were deemed inadmissible by the judge, who wrote in a court filing that the incidents weren't similar enough to the Floyd incidents. Those incidents spanned 6 years. In 2014, Chauvin placed his body weight on the upper body and head of a man to handcuff him, according to prosecutors. In February 2015, Chauvin tried to restrain a man by putting pressure on his lingual artery, which is below the chin bone, prosecutors wrote. Chauvin pushed the man against a wall and applied a neck restraint. Once the man was face down on the ground, he handcuffed him and kept him there until backup arrived. In 2016, April, Chauvin restrained a man who would not follow instructions, placing his hands around the man's neck and applying pressure to both sides, according to the prosecutors. The officer forced the man backward onto the sidewalk, handcuffed him, and walked him into a squad car. A small crowd of concerned citizens, everybody, this is in April of 2016, gathered to watch. Prosecutors watched. The man complained of asthma and the paramedics were called. And Eric Nelson, Chauvin's attorney, objected to hearing these acts in court, saying they weren't similar to what happened with Floyd, and that they were, quote, non-criminal incidents of Mr. Chauvin acting in his duties as a Minneapolis police officer. CK, give me the elevator pitch on that before I go to Robert Patillo. Seems like he's got to think about choking people.
Well, you know, this is not surprising. Of course, it's not surprising. That the judge would not allow it to be admitted or for the jury to hear it, I'm not sure that I understand the rationale, but that is in the judge's discretion. The judge can determine whether similar acts, which is what they are, similar acts, are admissible or if they're highly prejudicial. Sort of the legal barometer is the information that they're seeking to admit more prejudicial, meaning will it prejudice the case more than it is probative? That's generally the barometer, and both sides get a chance to argue whether it should be admitted or not. So the judge must have felt that they were, I guess the rationale, they weren't similar enough to be admitted to show a pattern and practice and all that kind of stuff. Those are legal questions, and that's squarely within the judge's discretion. That's why it's so important that we look at who's on the bench. And I'm not making any comment about this judge. I don't know much about this judge other than what's in the public domain. But it is important to know who's on the bench and who you get picked for these trials, because that can be just as devastating, good or bad, as who's trying the case. So my thoughts on this trial, I think that I said from the beginning that it's going to just take one person to hang this jury, and that I was not optimistic that there would be a conviction in this case. I'm very hopeful that justice will prevail. And for justice to prevail, in my assessment, there would be a conviction. But based on what I'm seeing, based on the evidence, and based on how these cases are always tried, this is nothing new. The way that the defense is posturing this case is nothing new. This is how there's a playbook for trying these police brutality cases. And so, and for defending these police brutality cases, I'm not optimistic, but I am hopeful. And I hope that the community is bracing itself and preparing itself for either outcome, but particularly preparing itself for an acquittal or a hung jury. I hope the community is preparing itself for that. Legally, there are going to be a lot of discretionary calls that the judge will make, such as the one we just talked about. The evidence, the defense hasn't even presented its case yet. So what we're seeing, like the negative stuff that we're seeing, is the defense cross-examining a witness, because when you right now the prosecution is in its case, presenting its witnesses with strong evidence, a strong testimony, and the defense, meaning the people defending Chovin, have the opportunity to cross-examine all the witnesses. And when you cross-examine your witnesses, you inject your theories. And in this case, it's a criminal trial, they must convict Chovin beyond a reasonable doubt. So in every turn, every cross-examination, an artful cross-examiner is injecting doubt. And that's how you cross-examine witnesses, whether you are cross-examining them in a civil case or a criminal case. You're pushing your theories. So what we're hearing is making us feel kind of uneasy about the way the defense is defending the case is merely the cross-examination. They haven't presented their case in chief. Wait until they present their case in chief. You talk about feeling uncomfortable. You're going to feel most people will feel very uncomfortable about the evidence, because they're going to have a lot of, I predict, damning evidence against George Floyd, the circumstances, what happened. They're going to bring out all the wonderful, great, glorious, fantastic, magnificent, extraordinary things that Derrick Chovin has done.
Are they going to bring out the fact that he was trying to choke these other people out? I mean, why was that
not
admitted?
Because that's not part of the defense. That's part what the prosecution's trying to get in, not what the people defending him. Well, the people defending him are trying to, no.
The prosecution,
their job is not to demonize their claim.
Well, hold on. The prosecution will not allow, the judge will not allow them to bring any of this information in to the case. Is that what am I reading that correctly?
I don't know if it's any of the information, but it may not allow, as I understand it, some of the information won't come in because the judge thinks it's not probative to the issues at hand. We may disagree with the judge, but that is the judge's courtroom.
That is crazy. I'm sorry.
And just so that we're clear, I know, but let me just be clear, because I don't want there to be any confusion here. The defense is not going to present any information that's damning to Chovin, to their own client. They're going to present information that's damning to George Floyd. So this discomfort you're feeling now is going to get 1,000-fold when the defense puts on its case.
Okay. Well, we're going to take your calls. We've got a lot of callers. Robert, you're still there. I know that. But Jonathan, very quickly, what about all this evidence of this man trying to choke people out? I mean, he knows the artery to hit. That's going to kill you. Right, Jonathan? I got him.
Right. I think the young man that's the MMA fighter, he described all of these super suplex MMA professional moves that Mr. Chovin was doing. Clearly, like Attorney Hoffler just described, there's a trend and there's a pattern here. This is how the jury gets prejudiced. And I also didn't agree with this rumor, I don't know if it was verified or not, that there was a $27 million settlement in this case. That, to me, is tantamount to bribery. How can you settle a case if you haven't determined who did something wrong? So who's guilty? The city of Minnesota?
Oh, okay.
That's hogwash.
I need to clarify.
It's so vague and nebulous. Beg your pardon?
I got less than a minute.
I have to clarify with the settlement.
I got
The
30
settlement
seconds.
is on the civil case. Right, the settlement's on the civil case, not on the criminal case. The settlement that took place, it's on the civil case. There's always a civil case and a criminal case.
Well, when we get on the other side, wouldn't
I'd
that
like to
prejudice
respond
the
to that.
jury?
Okay.
Yeah, I want you to speak to that on the other side.
Yeah.
Whew. Yeah,
Yes, it
no,
could.
because there's a whole lot. We got a lot of callers who want to weigh in too. So more of the Santita Jackson Show, WCPT 820 in Chicago and AM 950 Radio, Minneapolis, St. Paul. What is going to happen in the Derrick Chovin case, in the killing of George Floyd? Back in just a minute. Whew. Okay, you guys, this is a lot. But don't spend your best stuff on off the air. But I mean,
Well, first of all, good morning, Jonathan. How are you?
Hey,
And
I
Dwight
am doing superb.
I mean, I heard
Well,
your voice go
no,
up,
yeah,
CK, talking to Jonathan. So you say, look, Jonathan.
I
You sound like all these other women talking to Jonathan. Oh.
No, that's my baby CK. I know she had to get that little punch in. I love CK. I mean,
well,
I'm gonna talk to her offline. I'm gonna talk to her offline because
the civil case.
they know they told this the case. Because you know these white folks like.
Of course, because that's the timing of the settlement. That's the timing of the settlement. Of course they did, but that's the political issue.
Oh.
They settled the civil case. I mean, that was a real bona fide settlement. They settled the civil case, not the criminal case. So, and you know, they've been working on that from the beginning. But a lot of times they will settle the civil case so that in the minds of jurors, they're like, well, okay, the family got theirs, just, you know, they got something. So if we rule some kind of way, then, you know, it shouldn't be so bad because they did get $27 million. That's the philosophy.
I want you to go on and say that, please. Just go on and say that. Help me out, please. You know what I'm saying? They know they prejudiced.
Oh, but I want to make sure
he was 27 million.
Yeah, no, I'll help you out there, but I just want to make sure that we were clear between the civil and the criminal. That because people think that the criminal case settled, and it's a different thing, and it does sound crazy, but I think it needs to be clarified. Now, what you're raising is a political issue, meaning the impetus to settle the civil case before the criminal case was probably by design. And it was raised in voir dire and jury selection. And there were jurors that said, yes, they were impacted and influenced by the fact that there was a $27 million settlement. So it's absolutely a significant issue.
They knew exactly what they were doing. They did.
Of course they always do.
And Santita, let me be clear. As you get ready to make your peanut butter and jelly sandwich or your tuna sandwich and put in a brown paper bag, and you have to miss the day of work so you can go to jury, and you hear about this guy getting $27 million, yeah, that hits you upside the head a certain kind of way.
Wait a minute.
Yeah, but
I'd rather be dead.
Right.
Now, look, and when the two people who came out of the car with them, this is a guy who said he wants to take the fifth because he has his own street game going. I mean, I can see this going south.
He's a pusher.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, he's a pusher. Maurice is his pusher. That's why he was the best friend riding in the passenger side. Yeah, he's dirty as a dog. Yeah, that's him.
Oh, wow. Oh.
He's the pusher.
Okay.
Yeah.
He's the pusher man. I'm going back to Curtis Mayfield, CK. They don't know anything about that.
He got a long rap record of being a dope dealer. That's why he doesn't want. That's why he wants to be quiet. Because if they put him on the witness stand, they're gonna show George, you got some bad company. Well, George was still a user. Okay, no surprise there. But then they're gonna indict this guy. That guy I ain't got nothing to do with nothing. I ain't seen nothing.
60 seconds.
Oh, thank you. Well, Facebook, I hope you all have had an entertaining time with the rapper CK Hoffler. and Dwight has now said a word.
I'm the rapper.
Girl.
But look, you have to diversify your skill set.
Babe, when I got that video, I said somehow or
I
another,
keep my day job.
The Swiss boarding school, that didn't fit. I said, I wonder if they had a category fit over in Switzerland. I don't know. I'm going to leave it alone. I'm just going to call Ethel and say, Ethel, you didn't tell me homegirls got scales. We did not know this.
But,
All right.
but Santita, like to just amplify the discussion on the criminal and civil case so that
Okay.
people get the
Please do
political dynamic.
And
Yeah.
then I'm going to go. I'm
I
going to
think that's what-
Robert, and then I'm
That's
going to
what
callers
Jonathan gets.
because I got a full bank of callers. But I want you all to jump in on that because there are a lot of pieces. We're coming up.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show, Monday, April 5th, 2021, AM 950 Radio, Minneapolis, St. Paul, and WCPT 820 here in Chicago. We're taking your phone calls about the Derrick Chovin case. And we have had quite the discussion offline. Please call me or text me at 773-763-WCPT. GWC Injury Lawyers gives you the opportunity to text me or call me at that number. So please do that. And I promise you we're going to get to you. But before I say anything, L. Stanley Davis, you had a birthday and you didn't tell anybody. My sweet, I love everybody. Say hello. Say happy birthday to L. Stanley Davis. CK, everybody, Jonathan, say hello. Say happy birthday.
Stanley.
Hello and
Stanley,
happy birthday.
happy birthday.
We love you, Stanley.
Hey,
Stanley, he's our Holy Ghost brother. He's holding up the bloodstained banner. We love Stanley. Okay. Now, you know what, CK, you were trying to clarify for Jonathan a point that, I said, well, I don't get it either. But, I'm not a lawyer. Help me. Help us, CK.
Well, actually, there are two things. One, there are two cases. There's a civil case where there was a $27 million settlement, and that happened before the trial. And then there's a criminal case that's going on now. The criminal case of Derrick Chovin, the police officer that that killed, in my impression, George Floyd by putting his knee to his neck for 9 minutes and 29 seconds. So that's the criminal case that the state brings. So what we were talking about was there was a settlement in the civil case beforehand. I agree with Jonathan, and we didn't have a lot of time to explore this, that the timing of the civil settlement was done by design, of course, in my impression, right before the criminal trial. And the question about whether the $27 million settlement in the civil case would impact the jurors was raised in voir dire meaning jury selection. That was something that was raised with jurors. They asked the question more to this effect: would it impact your ability to sit on this jury and render a fair and impartial judgment of this defendant? Does the fact that there was a $27 million settlement for the family of George Floyd impact your ability to sit and be impartial and look at the evidence, blah, blah, blah? And it did, and some folks, as I understand it, did say it would impact them. And so the notion that it wouldn't, I think, it's just deviating from human nature. I think the reason why the settlement, and I am not condemning the lawyers or anyone involved in the settlement. Certainly, George Floyd's family deserved every penny that they got and more, because you can never bring back someone who has been wrongfully killed. So I'm not even commenting on that, but it's just the timing of it perhaps was so that jurors potentially would know, well, if we don't convict him, at least the family got some money. That's the notion.
CK, that's the problem. Because politics, all this stuff this is optics. I mean, and I don't blame the lawyers, but I'm saying that's not the best. Those are not the best optics. And this is about optics as much as it is anything, because we saw this man with his knee on his neck for 9 minutes and 29 seconds, but they're going to make this about optics, and the optics next.
Well, that's,
yes, Dwight.
You're right. And I think that's why George Floyd's brother said, and remember the press conference, he said, look, I want y'all to understand something. I prefer to have my brother here. There's not been justice. I prefer for my brother to be here. This $27 million, nothing will bring my brother back. I'd give it away in a moment to have one more minute with my brother. So that they recognize.
Okay.
They recognize the optics of it as well.
It's all relative.
Dwight?
Hello? And it's all relative. That's why I say that I go back to the fact that last week, those gymnasts got $1.5 billion for being molested by the doctors. And $1.5 billion, and that a white girl's virtue is worth more than a black man's life.
Well, you know what? Let me go to you, Kevin from Arlington Heights. Kevin, what's on your mind?
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
My whole thing when this all first went down and I started tuning into it on TV and everything was one of the things I thought when I got information about this police officer and all the violations previous to this that he had. Why was this man allowed to continue to keep his job? I mean, this police officer has a boss, and his boss has a boss. And as far as I'm concerned, those two people failed George Floyd miserably. It's obvious. And they failed. And they failed everybody else, every other citizen who's ever been subjected to any abuse by this police officer or any other police officer. So, you know, we shouldn't even be having this conversation. George Floyd should still be walking this planet right now. But there are people who are in charge of this police officer who did not do their job.
Kevin, what did you see with the 9 minutes and 29 seconds? What did you see with that?
What I saw was somebody who was on the ground, not resisting, not trying to fight and get up. I just saw them laying there, you know, and verbally, you know, expressing how they're feeling, you know, and I believe Mr. Floyd was handcuffed at the time, correct?
Yes, he was handcuffed, and he had several other police officers kneeling on him as well.
Sure. And from what I understand, and I could be wrong, but it's very difficult to get a police officer fired because they're protected by their union.
Oh.
And it's like what I saw there was just unbelievable. It's like, okay, was there even a need to be, you know, just even posturing or standing over George Floyd at the time he was on the ground? There's no reason for that. He wasn't resisting. He wasn't trying to get up. You know, he wasn't moving about. He was just laying there. So this, as far as I'm concerned, is cut and dried. And like I said, this police officer's bosses need to be held accountable also. You know, they should not be able to walk away from this entire thing scot-free.
Kevin from Arlington Heights has spoken. Anita from North Carolina, I think I know who you want to speak to today. Anita?
Good morning.
Good morning. Jonathan's on the line for you.
Good morning.
Yeah, well, we have a lot of work to do, and I think Santita and Jonathan, I think we need to work with Princess Diana's children. There are some decent Caucasians on this earth, and some people that stand for justice. And you are Reverend Jesse Jackson's children, and you're teaching democracy the way Martin Luther King said it should be, and protecting every citizen. And that's got to happen all over the world. And I really am thankful that Reverend Jackson has decent children that think this is worth keeping. That's first of all, over all of it. You know, we're really blessed and fortunate. It's been 400 years coming, and we need to keep that. But I wanted to say, the guy that had the cigarettes, I think his name was, I don't know if it was Michael Brown, or so many people that things have happened to. And we watched him die on camera. I mean, after that, I don't even know how George Floyd even came anywhere near death, you know, because I sat here and I watched this man die on television. The one that was selling cigarettes, he died over a cigarette.
Eric Garner. Uh-huh.
George Floyd died over $20. I mean, this is crazy.
It is crazy. Anita, Jonathan, this is nuts. Eric Garner, I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. Michael Brown.
And there's a pattern there. The allegation of selling a loose cigarette, Tamir Rice, the allegation of it being a gun. I mean, these are allegations. Like, when do these become executions from allegations? At George Floyd, it was alleged it was $20. The police never went into the shop to look at the dollar bill. And if so, do they have any pins that have detection? Do they have any screens? They don't do that sort of work. I mean, this is what only heightens to me the fact that this is execution style. Like, and to this day, it hurts what I think. George Floyd doesn't know what he died for. There was no conversation. It's get out, hand on the gun. And I saw the grown men out there crying. I saw the child that's been traumatized. They videoed it. I mean, what could any responsible citizen could have done different? What could they have done different? This is what's so humiliating and heartbreaking to me, that everyone acted responsibly but the police. And then for the testimony of the woman working 911, bless her heart, she says, I thought my screen had frozen. I couldn't believe he was still on his neck. She says, I thought my screen had frozen.
But and see, Dwight, we tell our children to comply, but when they comply, they die. I mean, it's like you can't win. And Dwight, and then you, Robert, you can't win. You cannot win, Dwight. What are you
No,
supposed to do in a
it's because
situation like that?
pray, pray, pray. Because it's set up for you to lose. The only thing that could have happened was that the spectators could have jeopardized their lives. And if they intervened, they would have gotten shot. One of the guys, we were seized and assaulted by the spectators. It is a no-win. And that's what makes it so frustrating. But it's also what makes it so dangerous. It's why I was talking about last week and why the politicians say the city's on the edge is because when you see there's no win, it leaves you with one option. And that is, if I'm going to die anyway, I may as well take other folk with me. And that's the frustration you see. And that's what Dr. King was talking about when he was saying that these riots are the screams of the oppressed who really have no options at some point but to become violent because you take the options off the table when there's a no-win.
Robert, what are your thoughts before I go back to the callers?
Well, I think what people have to understand is that with a 404B motion, a prior bad act motion, generally what you're looking for is the general principle is that we're not trying somebody on reputation, we're trying them on the instant case. So that's the judge's rationale in not allowing in the previous cases of excessive force because they do not want to color the jury to believe that because it has happened previously that it has an impact on what happened now. There is a balancing test, however, which is, as CK said, you have to look at the probative value of the information versus the prejudice that it will present to the jury. The prosecution's argument, of course, is that this shows a course of conduct and helps to establish intent. Because what we've seen thus far is the prosecution has not established the intent to kill. They have not established the motive for Mr. Chavez to take this action. They have not established any prior dealings that would indicate that that this was anything except for a reckless manslaughter or negligent homicide. Which is what needs to be established, which is the lower charges versus the more serious charges of murder, which I think most of the community is looking for. So this week we're going to have to look at how they can establish motive and intent. That is going to be very difficult, particularly having the thin blue line there and the code of silence of police, because let's say we had testimony from one of his other officers that he worked with, saying that he had previously had animus with Mr. Floyd, or saying that he had previously made statements about disliking Mr. Floyd. That goes towards showing intent. That goes towards proving murder. Without that sort of information, without the prior bad acts information coming in, it's going to be interesting to see how exactly prosecution maneuvers to try to establish both motive and intent to kill on Mr. Chavez to vitiate a higher charge of murder versus a negligent homicide or a reckless homicide.
Brad from Elk Grove. Brad, what's on your mind today?
I think thanks for taking my call, Santita. I believe the $27 million given before the case, the settlement, it's a wash in a lot of ways, because a lot of people could say, hey, they're admitting guilt. And the city could be admitting guilt for police policies that allowed Officer Chovin to think it was okay to keep his knee on his neck that long. On the other hand, the $27 million, as you spoke to earlier, or one of your guests, hey, they've got the money. They don't need any more. So, I mean, to me, it works both. You know, it cuts both ways, and I'll take my comment off air.
Well, you know what? It does cut both ways. And that becomes the problem. And there's a pattern of these people getting killed, their families get some kind of settlement, and that optically, because this is a game of politics too, CK. And I want the elevator pitch from you, CK, and I want something from Jonathan and Dwight and Robert, because that becomes a problem, right?
Well, it does become a problem, but let me just clarify something. In the criminal trial, it's not about the family getting more money. There's no more money. They have already settled with the family. The criminal trial is about convicting or not convicting for the murder of George Floyd. It's not about, there's not a monetary. And when the civil case, when you settle a civil case, the parties explicitly say they are not admitting to liability and they did nothing wrong, typically when there's a settlement agreement. So there's no admission of it. Now, of course, the public may not know that. The settlement agreements a lot of times are confidential initially. When it involves a city or a county or a public entity, maybe they are made public at some point. But there's not going to be an admission of guilt by the city in settling money. It's just a risk, just like with any other civil settlement. It is a settlement between that entity and the family. So there's no more money. I just want to make these things clear. Without a doubt, we have to watch the evidence very carefully in this case. And I think we have to brace ourselves for an outcome that may not, that may be very, very disturbing locally and in this country and globally, of what it will mean, what it's going to say to the world if the officer that we saw kill George Floyd, we saw this with our own eyes, the world saw this. If that person is acquitted, meaning not held responsible, not held, made guilty for that, if that happens, that's going to send an incredible message to the world and to this country and to that locality. And I think that is what we need to focus on. But let's watch the evidence. And just remember, defense has not presented its case yet.
Sure.
So it's going to get very, very, very uncomfortable.
Dwight?
Can I add this? The difference is, though, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
The difference is, as you very well know, TK, is that when OJ had to deal with paying for the civil charges, in his case with his ex-wife, the money came out of his pocket. He didn't really have the money, but such money as he had was extracted from his account. They went to his bank and got his money. When these policemen have to pay or get charged, the city pays. The police don't pay. We pay in their behalf. So they are indemnified. There is no accountability. There is no penalty they have to pay. The most that they get is desk duty, which becomes almost like a vacation for a year with pay. And they still get overtime. And so they really have no liability. Even their union don't have to pay. I always say that if the union was liable and the union had to pay for these civil cases, it would at least put pause in their mind that somebody that is coming out of somebody's salary that they're close to. As it is now, they have no liability other than the fact that we indemnify them, they keep their jobs, and society pays in their behalf.
And then with OJ, they did this case, they did the civil after the criminal. They were going to they kept it clean. They kept it clean. This is, I don't know. Let me go to Ron from Naperville. Ron?
Hello, Santita.
Hey, Ron, how
are you?
Good hearing your voice.
Great. Yeah. You have a lot of lovely attorneys on, and I want to ask this question to the team. One of the problems I've seen, and I have police in my family's father and a brother, is they don't charge police officers correctly. So they will go for something that sounds good in the press, but there's no way you'll ever put a police officer murder one. That's just not possible because that's never going to be provable. But if they were to, if the DAs were to put forward real charges that have a real chance of having its day in court. That's my concern, because I've seen in New York, where I'm from, we would have people walk away with all kinds of horrible shootings and all sorts of things, and it was, oh, well, you know, he was charged wrong. And you're like, how can you charge someone wrong unless you were doing it on purpose? And I'm just wondering if there's been a study as to the actual charges, whether or not they really can apply or have virtually no chance of sticking when you have lethal force authorized by a person. And so I'm just wondering.
No, I mean, I think that's a brilliant question. CK, I got a minute. Are they being charged? Has he been charged correctly? Because what is third-degree murder, second-degree murder first? What is that?
Well, I think that is an excellent question, and that is always in fact, these were the issues that were raised earlier. As you'll recall, there was some discussion whether it should be first, second, or third degree. The difference in the charges has to do with the intent. You know, it's hard to show that a police officer intended, although in this case we did see, intended to kill someone, you know, versus coming into a situation, exercising what they believe was the appropriate restraint and all that kind of stuff. So in this case, they might very well have the evidence to do that. But that's why you've got multiple charges against Derrick Chauvin, because and there was a lot of debate about this ongoing. And when we see these cases against police officers, there's always, from the ones that I've seen, some type of a debate of whether the charges are appropriate, because the family is pushing the most severe charge, for sure. And the people who sit, they're pushing the most severe charge, put them away for life, or if it's a death penalty state like Georgia, you know, have the person subject to the death penalty. That's what the family is pushing, because they want to see justice at the maximum level. The prosecutors a lot of times are saying, just like in the Breonna Taylor case, you know, we don't believe that the evidence is there because of the way the law is written to be able to get a conviction under this law. And so then they are criticized heavily by the family for not pushing hard enough, whereas a lot of times, and I'm not saying all the time, but a lot of times the prosecutors want to win. They're looking at what they can prove, what is likely, where they can get a conviction under the law. So I think that's an excellent question. It shows the struggle between what the family may want and what the public may want, and what the law, what's likely to happen under the law in these different states.
Let me get a minute from Dwight and then from you, Jonathan, to close us out. 1 minute, Dwight, your thoughts.
I think that was a good answer, TK. It's you call it twits in between, and a lot of this is the police are protected by the very laws that are put in place as to indemnify them from any liability. The police have a very dangerous job, and many of them have real short-range decisions to make, and you know, and it's real. But for some of them, it is a pretext for them to exercise a prejudice and a power that they don't, you know, unto themselves would exercise, because they you know, they got complexes, they got issues, they got prejudices, and they impose that on the people that they're set up to serve. And so it's a very difficult situation. I hope people are prepared, understanding that this can go either way. And again, I hope it does not get violent, and I hope that we just keep on fighting. I just have low expectations on this one in terms of how people are going to respond.
My time is running short. Jonathan, the last minute belongs to you.
Well, I like Robert's comment, but I hope the prosecution steps up their argument to prove the intent. There's an established history with Mr. Chauvin. There's an established relationship with him and George Floyd. And there's some history. I wish they would stick to the point and take George Floyd off trial and keep Mr. Chauvin on trial.
Okay, I got about 30 seconds. Robert, you're in radio. You know what to do. Give me 30.
Absolutely. And I think what's important for people to understand this week is to be looking at this issue of intent. Look at this issue of motive. It's very hard to prove that somebody who was allowed to kill people as part of their job intentionally murdered somebody. So this is the difference between a regular case, normal person, and what the police, what the burden is trying to prove this against police. The prosecution has their work ahead of them.
Everybody, we're going to be looking at this case. It'll be back up in about an hour or so. So keep it locked here on AM 950 Radio in Minneapolis, St. Paul. We got the latest and greatest information for you about this case and about a perspective that you just don't hear. And so keep it locked right here. WCPT 820 in Chicago, AM 950 Radio in Minneapolis, St. Paul. We will be watching. The whole world is watching, everybody. We want to know if George Floyd will get justice. Jonathan Jackson just said George Floyd died not knowing why he was in handcuffs. Can you imagine? I'm Santita Jackson. I love you all. Can't wait to be with you tomorrow. God bless you. Let's keep looking at this trial and look at everything around you. What a wonderful time to be alive. What a wonderful opportunity for us to get things right in this world. I'm Santita Jackson. God bless you. Talk to you tomorrow. Robert, CK, Jonathan, Dwight, you all are jewels.
Love you, love you.
I love you, love you.
All right, Robert. All right, Santita.
I love you, love you, love you.
CK.
And CK.
All right, Dwight.
Go on and CK. Let's
Okay.
call Jonathan. CK, Jonathan. Oh.
But wasn't that? But I mean, was my clarification not right and appropriate?
No. It was. Look, we need the clarification because that's part of the challenge. We're not lawyers. So, but also Jonathan and Dwight are talking about the politics of this too, because Dwight brilliantly brought up the OJ case. OJ, they wanted to pin him to the wall as a criminal, but then they separated out, and they, mind you, they didn't bring out Nicole Brown Simpson's history. Because she ran with a drug crowd. That's real. And she had a woman living with her who had a huge drug debt, who left her home the night before she was killed. I mean, come on. There's a whole lot going on with that case, but they would not allow them to bring that into the courtroom. Ugh. I mean, and F. Lee Bailey, you both know as lawyers, one of the most talented, one of the most brilliant legal minds in the history of American jurisprudence. He lost his license. You know he did. He did. And he said, there's so much about this that you all do not know. And the fact that this man choked people out or tried to choke people out, and that's not admitted, well, that's not really like that's not like what? So, we're going to see, but I'm going to run, everybody, because, I got to go take care of the man who sired Jonathan and I, Daddy. I'm going to go see these doctors right now. I'm going to see these doctors right now. They've been excellent, but I want to make sure that they're pushing him the way that they need to. He's going to do that. But I love you all.
And love you too. And Jonathan, I'd like you to be on my show tomorrow.
Call him.
I'll give you a call.
Call him. Send him a text. Call him now.
I'll send him a text. Okay, I will.
Okay, love you, girl. Love you, Dwight. Okay. Love you, Robert. Love you, Devin. Love you all. Mwah. Stanley Davis, happy birthday, my sweet. I wish you would let me know, but thank you, Lorraine. And Willie, how are you? And Adrian, and oh my goodness, happy birthday, Stanley Davis. And D-Ray. And oh, you're just sweet. I love you. But we'll be watching the trial. I'm going to miss the first part of it, but I'm going to catch it a little bit later on. Love you all, everybody. God bless. Bye-bye.